Dr. Kyneth. My name is Shiana Albanese, and this is my Old Testament character study, on the book of Ruth. So we are going to be going through all 4 chapters of the book of Ruth throughout the entirety of this video as we look at some of the life lessons from the life and story of Ruth. So the first lesson that we can actually learn from this entire story is the importance of loyalty. So throughout the entire book, you always see that Ruth has been loyal to Naomi. She is loyal to her mother-in-law. There's actually a verse within the Bible that says this very, very well, and that is found in the first chapter of Ruth. So the verse I am about to read from my Bible is from Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 through 17. And it says, "But Ruth replied, 'Do not urge me to leave you or to turn your back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, that even death separates you from me.'" So, for some context here, Ruth is from a non-Jewish background. So at this point, when she says these things, it is truly meaningful to Naomi, because Ruth could have just up and left her. Like, she has no husband. She has no reason to still talk to Naomi. This is her mother-in-law. In modern society, not everyone likes their mother-in-law. But Ruth had this connection with Naomi and said, "Listen, I know you are going back to Bethlehem, and I will be coming with you no matter what, and I will follow in the ways of your God. I am going to leave aside my pagan lifestyle and a lifestyle that does not follow Jewish tradition, and I am going to follow your God, and I am going to follow you." And basically, at that point, Ruth is not just adopting this new style of life. She is abandoning all that she has ever known to follow Naomi to this new land. And basically, there is actually a term for this, which is in one of my sources. So the source that this Hebraic term comes from, that I am in my work cited, is from Diane Ferreira, and it is an article called 15 Beautiful Lessons We Can Learn from the Life of Ruth in the Bible. So in this article, it talks about the Hebrew term for loyalty and faithfulness, which is emnua. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not a ministry major, but basically it conveys just a term of steadfastness and reliability, and the emnua that Ruth shows towards Naomi is an example and a model for us to follow as to how we can remain faithful to those that we care about, even when times and circumstances can be extremely challenging for us. So, the second life lesson that we can learn from the story of Ruth is that good things can come out of terrible and dark times. So, like I previously mentioned, when all the men in their life passed away, Ruth and Naomi lost everything. It was not easy being a widow in biblical times. Women could not fully work. They could not own land or property. They couldn't really do anything without the approval of a man. So that basically meant that when they lost the men in their life, they had lost everything. And that is why they go back to Bethlehem. They go back so that they can get a fresh start on life. And the thing is, if they hadn't lost everything, and this is the oddly beautiful part where stuff like that can only be of God, even when they had lost everything, the Lord was still providing good things for their life. So, like, if Ruth and Naomi were able to buy food, Ruth wouldn't have been able to go and actually meet Boaz while she was gleaning in the field. If she and Naomi had nothing, she would not have met the man that would change her life forever. And that is not the most glamorous way to meet, but it is just how God works. And the thing is, we're going to focus on Naomi really quick, because Naomi had already felt that God had basically dealt her a terrible hand in life. Like I said previously, in Ruth 1:20, she tells the people that she knew back home when she comes back. She says, "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord had brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord had afflicted me. The Almighty brought misfortune upon me." Even in that deep, dark bitterness that Naomi was facing, the Lord was able to use Ruth to provide a way for good things to happen in her life. The story ends with Boaz marrying Ruth, and essentially, Naomi not only gains back the property that she had lost, she gains another son, which is such a beautiful thing, because she had lost all the sons and her husband that she had borne. But the Lord brought her a new son, and that is just, it's just so beautiful, honestly. So from my source, the previous one I used, from Diane Ferreira, she mentioned that both Naomi and Ruth, throughout all this, clung to their belief and clung to their faith in the Lord, that better days were ahead, and the Lord provided for them in tenfold. Our third point that we are going to be talking about is that there is always hope for redemption. So, in Ruth chapter 3, Boaz is called a redeemer, a guardian redeemer, if you will. Other translations will call him a kinsman redeemer. In Hebrew, which I have the Hebrew translation from my source by Joy Burgess, which is 7 powerful lessons we can learn from the story of Ruth, it says that that word is called goel. So basically, goel signifies someone who restores the rights of another and avenges wrongs. So that definition that I just read is from my source from Diane Ferreira. And basically, Boaz's role as goel doesn't just redeem Ruth and Naomi, but it preserves their family lineage, because they are able to have the land and they are able to do all these things. And the craziest part is that Ruth, in that lineage that was saved through Boaz, eventually becomes a part of the lineage of Christ, which is just such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you can learn more about that and how that all connects in our beautiful textbook, which is written by Arnold and Bear. Our fourth point that we are going to be talking about is that God can use anyone for his purpose. My source from Joy Burgess says that Ruth's story is incredibly ordinary. She doesn't come from any sort of famous lineage. She doesn't have any riches, any grand position. She's unfortunately a widow, and she is not originally Jewish. She comes from an enemy nation. And nothing up to the point that we see her in this book is going in her favor. But she always has confidence in her faith. So basically, Ruth is one of the least likely people you would expect for God to use. There are so many people like her in the Bible, both Old and New Testament. But the thing is, the Lord essentially equips Ruth with the courage to go on and to just be obedient to not just what Naomi is telling her to do, but what the Lord is telling her to do. And through all this obedience that Ruth does throughout the entirety of the story, the Lord is able to change her life and is able to not just redeem her and her family, but also, like I said, she becomes a part of the lineage of the Savior of humanity, Jesus Christ. And I think that is just a beautiful, beautiful thing, that basically Ruth, who is a Moabite, becomes the great-grandmother of King David. And that line of David goes all the way up to Jesus. And it is because of that lineage that we are all able to be here today, and that we are able to be saved. And that, to me, is just such a beautiful thing. And for that last statement that I just said, I got that from my source by Diane Ferreira, which, to remind you of the title, is 15 Beautiful Lessons We Can Learn from Ruth in the Bible. And finally, our fifth and final point that we are going to be talking about today is the importance of having good character. Ruth's character made her attractive to Boaz. And basically, each one of us as Christians should strive to have a character that not just makes us attractive to other people in the way of romantically, but in a way that makes it attractive to show people that we are Christians, we are different, we are not of this world. And that is what God calls us to do. That phrase right there, I loosely translated that from a news source by Moses P. Paul called 3 Life Lessons from Ruth and Boaz. The next thing that I am going to cover comes from our source by Joy Burgess, and it says basically that Ruth went above and beyond in how she respected her mother-in-law and just the general respect and kindness that she shows throughout the book. In fact, the entire city of Bethlehem knows her as a very virtuous woman because of how good her character is. She just works extremely hard to be able to provide for her and Naomi, and basically, because she was able to honor God, her good character was magnified, and we should strive as Christians to basically be men and women of integrity. So basically, there is a concept in Judaism called hesed, which means basically showing loving kindness and compassion. So basically, the thing is, Ruth expresses this throughout the entirety of this chapter. You see her do multiple acts of hesed, and we also see Boaz do that as well, just by showing her kindness, by providing her safety and providing her food. But the thing is, this mutual display of hesed between Ruth and Boaz basically shows that as Christians, we should be supporting one another, especially during times of need. And that section came from my source by Diane Ferreira. And with that, that is the end of my video. Ruth, to me, has always been such an inspiring and beautiful story, not just of love, but how God can use and redeem anyone for his glory and for his purpose. So, now that we are done with the main part of the presentation, I will read to you now my Works Cited page. So, as I have previously mentioned, I use 2 print sources. My first print source is the Artisan Collection Bible in the NIV translation that was released by Zondervan in 2019. And my second source is our textbook for the course, which is Encountering the New Testament by Bill T. Arnold and Brian E. Baer. This was released in 2015. I mean, this is the class textbook. You already know when it was released, Dr. Kenneth. So then, I'm going to now go into my internet sources. The first one that I will mention is one by Joy Burgess, which is called 7 Powerful Lessons We Can Learn from the Story of Ruth on BibleKnowledge.com. It was released on August 8th, 2023. My second online source is by Diane Ferreira, and it's called 15 Beautiful Lessons We Can Learn from the Life of Ruth in the Bible from worthbeyondrubies.com, and this was originally published on January 30th, 2025. My final online source is from Moses Pierre Paul, and it is 3 Life Lessons from Ruth and Boaz from thewisebeliever.com, originally published on January 12th, 2022. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and God bless.